I feel like that's what all coin mining operations might actually start with. I can make you a billionaire. So let's start there. Welcome, everyone. This is the first episode of Return of the Mac. No, I probably shouldn't introduce myself with singing voice. I'll try to hold in. This is our very first episode. This is episode 1. It's our birthday. It's our anniversary. I really hope you don't forget that it's our anniversary. And we wanted to put together a podcast. I specifically wanted to put together a podcast not because I like to hear the sound of my voice, but because I've watched and listened to a lot of blogcasts or vlogcasts, I guess, and podcasts around cybersecurity. And it's not that they're boring. They certainly aren't. And it's not that they're not informative. But I want to keep things casual in a way. And I really want to focus the entire ethos of this show of Return of the Mac is bringing in guests, experts that are comfortable having these real conversations and demystifying things in our industry that are often seen as more complicated and it kind of excludes everybody else in society. So we're going to make it a little bit more open. I wanted to have candid, not catty, discussions talking about cybersecurity around breaches. Yes, I said the B word. The people that work within this industry, how this all affects you, and ultimately listeners that are the practitioner in security, the leader, the business owner, or any person that even enjoys podcasts. Maybe not murder podcasts because not a lot of murder happens in cybersecurity, right, Wes? I think if we did an episode maybe on, like what's the craziest cyber tech person? John McAfee. That might be a good one. But we're not doing that today. That's definitely not our focus. The goal with this is we're all faced with the reality of what cybersecurity is. I want to make sure it's a household name. And I want to make sure that we are serving all the people in these conversations, bringing light to the discussion a little bit, that this is the reality we face. And this is the reality you face. This is reality I face. So let's take this casual approach, but getting real with it a little bit more. So before I introduce myself and my guests, I'm going to put in our very fun sponsor reel here, thanking our sponsors for this episode specifically, Blackpoint Cyber and CyberFOX. Hi, my name is MacKenzie Brown. I probably should have started with that, but I think it's better that I start with the why that I'm here, and then you'll remember my name. I am the VP of security for Blackpoint Cyber. I am a little bit newer to the company, but I am having a blast already. Blackpoint serves the MSP community, and to be honest, I wanted to make sure that my first guest really encompassed all things of my path and my journey and how I got to here. This seat, these fancy background lights, and learning my 1080p, methodology for how this podcast thing works. So I would love to introduce my guest, Wes Spencer.
Mac, thanks for having me on.
Hello, Wes. Well, without giving away all the good stuff, can you kind of introduce yourself?
I would love
for
to.
Our audience?
First of all, I can't believe I am episode 1 guest. That actually means a ton to me. So thank you. You're just incredible. When this thing is like you're winning Emmys or whatever the awards are that we win, for me to say I was on the first episode of that's awesome. So I am a cybersecurity nerd by heart, always have been. And over the years, I've become a little bit less technical and I've learned how to speak the language of decision makers and speak the language of risk and learn how to communicate that to others that just don't really come from that background. And I learned that that's a unique skill set and it doesn't happen by accident. No one's skilled at that normally. It's something that I've had years poured into it. And really, I think if you boil so much of it down, Mac, I love the small business community and I love MSPs because they're the heart and soul of it. And I've seen that they don't have the resources, the skills, the expertise that the big orgs do that, I've come out of and you've come out of. And so there's an altruism here to all of that. And I love that opportunity. And so thanks for having me and can't wait to jump into discussion with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we talk about how we first met? Because really, there is a reason you are my first guest, because I would not be here or even at Blackpoint to be honest, and meeting the MSP community without. I've heard your nickname. Are you the
Well,
mayor
I
of
like to
the
go.
MSP
I
community?
like
Are
to
you the president?
go.
When is the
Yeah, you could call
HOA
me the
president?
HOA president, I suppose. I typically go by dictator. I have this running joke of like when I'm elected
Dictator.
dictator, I'll be your kind and benevolent dictator, and all your cyber problems will go away. And I even created a like dictatorcoin.com. I have my own crypto. I don't know if you know that. Yeah, so I can make
Oh,
you,
I
Mac.
did
I can make
not
you right after
know
this a
that.
billionaire in dictator coin, and it's going somewhere. I'm sure of it.
In dictator coin. I feel like that's what all coin mining operations might actually start with. I can make you a billionaire. So let's
Yes, I've
start there.
sideswiped this whole podcast just
Yeah.
to
Have
talk about
we?
dictator coin and pump it up.
Oh, and of course, my cat's going to join me right now. And we will just ignore that she's there for a minute. Yeah. I mean, we first met. You came to Idaho, where I'm located, actually, public information, which is funny. Idaho's a state in the United States. A lot of people don't realize that we exist. It's not Iowa or Ohio. I often get confused for those because the words almost sound the same. And you came and spoke at a cybersecurity summit, and then we met. And then you were like, hey, have you heard the MSP community exists? And I'm like, what's an MSP? And I'm like, oh, wait, I know what that is. And yeah, then one step forward, we're in Right of Boom. We'll put a plug later for the Right of Boom conference, I think, for this, so everybody knows what that is. And I think everything was downhill from there. You really just opened up. I'd like to say you're my gateway drug, as they say in elementary school, to the MSP community and ultimately to this new cyber
Well,
role that I'm in.
you're
So
you're quite
thank you.
welcome. I mean, I didn't do anything other than I heard you speak, and I'm like, holy crap! We have got to get her introduced into our community. So I remember beelining to you, and I had to wait for a couple people to finish chatting with you. I'm like, Mac, you don't know me, but I do this podcast thing called Cybercall, and it's got a whole bunch of these things called MSPs, and I would love to get you on. And I just, man, it's so cool. I had no idea what was going to happen with all of this, but you've been good for us. You've been good for the entire community, and so glad you're in and among us. When I saw you landed at Blackpoint, I just was so happy about that. So nothing but congrats, and you've deserved everything you got here.
Well, thank you. It's been a wild ride for sure. I think the question I'll never forget too is being on stage and asking to get everybody warmed up. I'm like, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? And I was shocked by the fact that
Well, it
people didn't
is.
think it was a
I
Christmas
mean,
movie.
we
I
all
think
know it is.
actually
Anyone else
it
that,
is a Christmas movie.
God forgive
Yeah.
them, but it is.
There's a Christmas cartoon book out there. You can look it up on Die Hard, and it comes with a little hanging Bruce Willis's character guy that you can put on your window. It's like the new
So many
elf
people
on the
just
shelf.
like to be contrarians.
I mean, it's
They
not.
just
I
want to
wish
find
it
something to
was.
argue about, even though they know they're wrong.
Yeah, that's how I like to start every talk. Is just let's give some sort of hypothetical question. Okay, well, what we want to do is take some hot takes or hot topics of the week. And I've got kind of a spicy one that I'm going to bring in right now for our hot topic of the week. And I gave you a heads up on this because it's spicy because it's, the oven is still hot. It just happened. And coming from the incident response world, I think you and I both really value empathy and having an understanding of the reality of what it's like to be in the situation that this is in. So, MGM, everyone's kind of heard of this. MGM Resorts International, a global hospitality and entertainment company. What was it? $33 billion net worth?
Some crazy number.
Something around that. Such a crazy number. And Monday was such a crazy day when this started hitting the headlines, but ultimately claimed to have shut down all of its IT systems after a cyber attack. I think they were not using the word cyber attack originally, but now the headlines have gone loose on this. They haven't really disclosed any details about it. But others believe within, again, the media and the headlines are believing that it's to be carried out by a ransomware group. I believe now it's an affiliate of Black Cat or Alfie ransomware group. Essentially, it's affected all of its operations and at a global scale too, kind of across the country. They've closed their casinos, their hotels. I mean, I read that the MGM actually owns most of the casinos
Crazy.
now on the Strip and some of those
Bonkers.
hotels, that's insane. Like it is bonkers. That's massive. When you talk about this, the reason why it's not just I think more people are focused on the organization. That's, to me, the shocker here, and the size of this enormous network and enormous, acquired level of casinos is insane. In Vegas, Atlantic City, a couple other locations, but they've suspended a lot of their gaming operations. I mean, Twitter is blowing up with pictures of slot machines still being down. Employees aren't at work right now for obvious reasons. There's a lot of unsubstantiated things, I believe, are unsubstantiated because the incident response investigation is ongoing. They're still working. I mean, they're still down. And we're filming this right now. It's a Thursday. So that's a long time. And I can only imagine from loss of revenue and just insane. So given that, what are your first
mine are
thoughts on
probably
it, Wes?
wildly different than literally everyone else on this one. Let's unpack this for a minute. There's so much to talk about here. So first of all, I saw it and I had a visceral feeling of dread and sorrow, not for MGM, right? I think most people look at this and say, oh, you big company, you reap what you sow, especially this, gambling and gaming company, blah, 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 blah. And I get it. Like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that kind of attitude to some degree, even though we don't know the whole story, but I had my heart sink.
Yeah.
And the reason I did is one of my really good friends who I went to high school with and college with is there, I shouldn't probably say his title, but very high up in IT over there. And even at one point ran incident response for them. So I'm just in a different position in the sense of like, this is one of my friends.
Yeah.
And I know what these things are like. You know what these things are like. Your life is gone while you're dealing with this. This is not a clock in, clock out. This is like, bring out the cots. We're not leaving. This is
right. This is going to be a long
this is the pressure cooker
journey.
This is every news media agency on earth is pounding their doors. This is angry customers left and right. This is, it's a pressure cooker. And so all I did was I texted him and I said, hey man, I was like, you don't even have to reply back. I doubt there's anything I can do for you, but just thinking of you. And he wrote back with one sentence. And I'll share the sentence because it's such a baller sentence. He goes, we were bred for this. That's all he sent me. And that's all I've said to him.
Wow.
That's it.
It's definitely
a mic drop moment. And I do think, Mac, though, it brings up maybe a bit of a bigger picture here. One of those bigger pictures that I see is, these cyber attacks, they do happen left and right all the time. We know this, but people don't care about it until it becomes tangible to them, till it becomes visceral, till it becomes real to them. It's like you already got me thinking on crypto because of the whole dictator coin thing. It's like NFTs. Breaches are like NFTs. Hear me out.
Oh, wait. Okay. Hold on. Let me prepare for this.
NFTs. First of all, do you own any NFTs? Okay.
No, I'm sorry. No, I don't. I don't wear Adidas and a hoodie and walk around like a gangster. I am a gangster.
I'll see if I can bring an NFT up for you while we're talking here. But the whole thing is I happen to own a few NFTs, not because they're cool, but because they're nerdy. But most people say what you would expect, which is that's dumb. What's the purpose of one of these NFTs that you have? Because they're not real. They're images, and you saw that Beeple guy sell that, first 500 days or whatever for like $1 billion. And people are like, the Mona Lisa's never even sold for that. What's going on here? And they can't unwrap their mind around it because you can just see a picture of it. Like why did someone spend $1 billion for something I can Google a picture of? And I'm like, yes. But you can see a picture of the Mona Lisa, yet when you go to the Louvre and see it in person, it's a jaw-dropping moment because that's the actual one. It's the physical, tangible reality. Every image that you see is just an image. What do I mean by this in cyber? In cyber, it's the same thing. People hear breaches and it doesn't affect them until Colonial Pipeline hit and they're filling their car, the bed of their pickup truck with gas until gas shoots to $50 a gallon.
Gas.
Yes. And then same with this.
Some
Bingo.
Mad Max stuff going on right
and
there.
And then you see pictures. Go ahead.
Or the ransomware attacks on the East Coast, right? That were hitting where they had to redirect patients to other hospitals. The people don't really, I see what you're saying. Like they just read the headline and some of the details, and they certainly don't know that what the response world looks like, or should I say recovery world, honestly, the restorative side there of really what it means until they're trying to go to the hospital because they broke their arm and they're going to have to go to a different emergency room. Or like you said, they're
Yep.
dealing gas on the side
Yep.
for $10 a gallon. Well,
Probably even higher
that's
than that,
probably not
right?
enough, probably
And
20, but
we're
yeah,
seeing
probably
this with the
higher than
MGM
that.
thing. We'll splice in some pictures into this, I'm sure. But I'm seeing these images of
Yeah.
people waiting in line to get checked into their hotel room because everything's paper. Like there's no digital system right now. And so of course, now this is to some degree cyber resilience in action, right? They actually have a paper system to get people
Yeah.
to check into a room. It's not efficient.
Some
They
organizations
do it.
can't do
But
that
yeah, when
nowadays.
you see
They can't
these
do
long
that.
lines and these pictures of people like as far back as the image shows waiting in line to get in, no doubt they're angry and mad. No one cares until they're impacted by a cyber attack. That's the thing. And you see this tangibility
Yeah.
come out in this. And so that's the big thing I wanted to chat about.
Yeah, I'm impressed that it's probably the first cyber thing I've seen show up on TikTok too. I mean, we were talking about conspiracy theories and things that are going around on TikTok, but to be honest, like when it comes to cyber, unsubstantiated thought processes, Twitter's or sorry, not Twitter, X. We should plug in some sort of sound effect every time I say over X, but we're going to see a lot of noise, and that's the hard thing is we're already desensitized to cyber attacks, to the B word, to breaches, to the things that go on in the world, whether you are a parent driving their kid to school and you hear about it on the news, or you watch it on the Today Show briefly and then they move on to the next segment, or you're an actual security practitioner where you're just in general maybe a little bit more pessimistic, but desensitized to the feeling of it. And that's, there's such, like you were saying, it's way bigger than what people realize. It's way bigger than a 2-minute news segment, probably not even that long, or a 1-minute time to read an article that gives no information, or sitting on X and reading a bunch of posts about it, like, oh, it was probably a help desk employee or a 10-minute conversation, or it was phishing. And maybe that is the reality of it. But yet we're still doing this opt-in world around cybersecurity, and we need to sensitize it. We need to bring that emotional response a little bit back.
And the other thing I think is helpful is we should use this as teaching and learning moments, right? So like my LinkedIn and my Twitter is just eaten up with MGM right now, which again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with people, prognosticating and how this could have happened. Where we cross a line is when you start seeing vendors jump in and say things like, well, this wouldn't have happened if you'd been using us, right? Like, oh, if you'd used our training platform, then your people wouldn't have clicked on that, or taken that phone call, blah, blah, blah. You don't know that. You see the ambulance chasers of the digital realm, and no doubt, no wonder no one respects our industry when we do that and then sort of attack our own. There's more, I promise you, there's more behind the scenes of what happened here than we'll ever know. Because that's just how these things are. We were just talking about a major event that happened a few years ago. I won't name the name of it, but I promise you, if you're listening today, your data was stolen from this breach that I'm talking about. I just promise you, it was that big. And I have a friend who was involved in that one, who was running cybersecurity for them. And he made a comment to me. He said, there's much more behind the scenes of this thing. And that's the killer, is that everyone blames us for this Apache Struts thing that caused it. How could you have let that happen? It was so simple. You could have stopped it. It was so obvious. You knew about it. He's like, yeah, but behind the scenes, there's politics. And because of these politics at a very high level, that's what led to this incident. That's what led to us not dealing with it. And I can't talk about that publicly. And that's sort of like, there's a layer 8, you talk about the OSI layer, the very top above application layer is political.
Is layer 8 gag orders and NDAs. Yeah. Gag orders, NDAs, and I'm sorry, your role is no longer needed in this company. We are reducing it to non-existent.
So I just think, I don't know about you, but I think there should be a healthy degree of empathy that comes alongside all of this too, right? Of like, let's not pile on overly bad, but let's definitely talk about it. That's to me the big story here is let's be careful on how we say and what we say on this thing.
I mean, coming from the incident response world, I can't tell you, especially when I was on call on weekends, getting on the phone with an attack that was escalated up to our team to perform an investigation, and I have to put on this almost ER-like face and persona to, a video conference that would be in the middle of the night 30 people around a conference room table that had been working all night long trying to see if their backup still worked or trying to pull off some semblance of trusted and secured assets that they could protect at that point. And I'm supposed to just come in and be like, howdy doody, how you doing? Because they're not doing good. And that EQ that you're talking about is so important. And it's important not just when you're in a position where you're getting on calls like that and you're working with people who are like, am I going to lose my job? Was this our fault? We don't know because we're about to go down a 2-week long investigation. So we don't even know the root cause. Or how is this going to affect not just our jobs, but all of our customers' reputation? I mean, we're going to get into a lot of that with the topic today, but I see what you're saying. I think we need to make EQ cool again or bring it back, especially in the community, cybersecurity community. It's easy when you do certain jobs to start to become a little bit more hardened. But no pun intended. But you definitely stop remembering the empathy part of it, which is also why I love that you're my first guest too.
But no, I think you're exactly right. The other thing I'll say about this one too, and I'm sure we can move on, but it is a teaching moment for non-technical decision makers, right? They need to understand the correlation here between why. Let's talk about the motive behind the bad guy for a minute, right? So the reason that they're doing this, we all know, is to make you pay up to get out, right? But the reality that these bad guys are doing, and you see this play out here, is they want to push you into pain so that they can entice you to pay them money to get out of that pain. Like the whole premise of ransomware is temporary discomfort and temporary chaos to pay you to get back out of it so you can go back to operation normal, right? That's what bad guys are doing. And if it's not ransomware, it'll be something else. It's always, that's what they're doing, is they're financially motivated. And so they're saying, well, from a digital perspective, if I just shut your systems down and lock you out of them by encrypting everything, and you pay me to get out, and I can give you this promise of everything will go back to normal, you're going to want to pay me. And so I think it's important that like decision makers understand that's why this stuff matters, is because people say, well, I'm not MGM, so I don't have money. I don't have their kind of money. I don't have, any data they care about. Well, sure. You other people may not care about your data, but you care about it, and you're making business off it. And by the way, you're I'm $2 million business. That's all. I'm not worth much. Well, did you know the average salary in Russia is like $14,000 a year US, if you want to compare it? So a $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 ransom is life-changing money for those bad guys. So we just really have to reframe all of this and understand you are a threat. And that's why ransomware is the choice du jour, because it works well to push you into pain, to entice you to pay.
And they have great customer service, probably better than an IT guy you might email because your mouse isn't working. They will absolutely make sure that they're able to assist you in all issues to make sure that you end up paying that extortion fee. It's crazy. It's
well,
crazy.
If only
this
we
is
could
the world we live in.
Switch them into making it dictator coin to pay, because then we'd be rich.
I know.
Right?
Could you imagine? I think you would be retiring then at that point. You're like, look, I'm empathetic, but in the same vein,
I think
I
minted
$1
1 quadrillion or some stupid number. So hey man, all we need is to get it to 1 cent, and then I can be a quadrillionaire. Eat that, Elon.
1 cent. All right, so maybe I'll plug it into the sponsor reel for people to go out. Dictator coin, so Wes Spencer can retire forever and buy an island. Perfect. Well, I actually love this MGM discussion just because we're bringing it down a level. We're normalizing it. It does affect every person that would be listening to this in a way, because we want to wake you up and make you realize this isn't just cybersecurity. It's not everyone's responsibility, but this is how the world is working now when it comes to a lot of these criminal organizations and syndicates that are basically extorting any sort of organization, business that you are going to solicit. So your data's out there. This is the world. Privacy, risk, all of that is going to start becoming a lot of more household venture names for people. Moving on to our topic. And thank you again, Wes, for being here. I want to get right into it. Our topic today is really a little bit of everything and anything that is going to be general cybersecurity of why. Why is this going on? And I know that feels like a vague general topic for the first episode, but I want to get everyone warmed up. I want to get everyone hooked on this a little bit so that we are not just demystifying some of these concepts, but we're really breaking it down into a genuine, candid conversation about why is this working? So is this are we in a cyber Hunger Games? And Wes, are you and I volunteering as tributes essentially for the cyber Hunger Games? Are we failing at cyber? Coming from right of boom world, I could probably say, oh yeah, we're definitely failing, but I definitely feel the empathy and the EQ conversation or topic that we've been talking about there. And I feel like that brings me back to left of boom, but where are we going wrong? Or are there things out of our control that impact the way that practitioners can do their job, the way that MSPs can do their job, and ultimately the way that small, medium business, our governments, the SLTT community, how are they able to actually do their job in trusting because maybe there isn't budget, maybe there are politics, maybe we're dealing with an enormous network that's been hit with M&A over the course of 5 years. So at what point do you know what trust chains exist out there and what don't? And yes, we still have a phishing problem. So let's create that visual first. Let's lay the land. It's 2023. We have AI and ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning in every marketing pitch. Of course, we have cyber syndicates and nation state groups. We have with their own customer service processes, let alone we have a full shelf of hacker opportunities for sale on the dark web from initial access. Basically, they're going to pay their way to get into your network because somebody already opened the back door, or they're going to purchase your data. That likely when we're talking about these ransomware attacks, that is unfortunately the reality of it too, is if the data's taken, you can wait 6 months, it's going to show right up. And then really have we normalized, regardless of the group, the effective attack campaigns of ransomware? And we have normalized that. And this is the lay of the land. And cyber insurance as well, which Wes, you're probably my expert there on cyber insurance when we need to plug it in so people realize
I love talking about that too.
But before we do that, we've laid the land. Here's some additional lovely stats I've pulled as a part of this landscape. So far in 2023, there's been an estimated 800,000 cyber attacks. And the number's still rising because the year's not over. So cool. Every 39 seconds, a threat actor targets a business's cyber infrastructure, or just infrastructure in general, I would imagine. And an estimated 300,000 new malware is created daily. And 92% of that malware is, drumroll please, not surprising, delivered via email. So these are just some general stats. I've told you 2023, thank gosh we have AI supporting us and security monitoring, but still 92% of malware are successfully being driven and delivered via email. So this is, did I mention this is not a murder podcast, but it is just as depressing sometimes. So Wes, given that, and a talent shortage, right? We have a major talent shortage. That's kind of where a lot of Blackpoint does our business, to be honest, is realizing that there is a talent shortage that impacts everybody. So the stat I actually pulled on talent shortage was the current stat is the cyber workforce peaked at 4.7 million people. Could you imagine? That's a lot of people at Black Hat. And last year at its highest level, it was at its highest level ever, which we're actually expecting it to rise again next year. So more people in this fun cyber game. However, we have 3.4 million security professionals that are still seeking jobs, and we're expected a 20% increase over 2021. So these are, we're seeking cyber professionals still. So a lot of unfilled positions. I don't know where the disconnect is. I can make assumptions and we can talk about that. But what are your thoughts on just these initial, here's the world we're living in. Here's some stats. This is normal. We're desensitized. We need more people working in it. We have a lot of open positions. What are your first thoughts on this? Why are we failing?
I mean, when it's presented that way, it doesn't seem like things are going so well for us. right? It kind of makes us, are we an embarrassment? Have we just completely failed from the beginning? I mean, one could argue that the whole reason this entire security industry come about was because of the genesis of how, like, the internet was even created. You know, it came out of DARPANET. It came out of an open environment. Security was not built in from the beginning. It was a closed ecosystem. And then, I guess because of Al Gore, if we want to go that direction, you know, it got opened up to commercial use, and, you know, everything changed. And so are we still paying for the sins of the past? Sure. But I'd actually take that a step back and say, I don't know that a lot of this, like, why is it, Mac, that you mentioned this, we still see so many breaches that happen, not because it's some really crazy 0-day, which happen more often than not, but it's because someone, you know, going back to MGM, if the reports from VX Underground are true and they just literally made a phone call, why is it that in 2023 and 2024, I'll just predict, phishing is the number 1 or 2 attack vector and entry point? Why is that? Why is that after we've spent millions and billions of dollars trying to correct and train our users? So maybe it's less about it being a cybersecurity problem and more about it being a human problem, more about it being an issue with us. And I don't just mean like the low-level employees that click on anything. I even mean security leadership. I even mean the leadership of the organization. And then that gets me thinking, and let me just trace this rabbit trail for a second. What if this whole, we talk about cybersecurity talent shortage, and that's true. What if it's not, what if we're looking at cybersecurity wrong? I don't have an answer to this, but it's just been thinking about this lately. What if it's less about cybersecurity being a trade craft and more about cybersecurity being a skill set that we embed everywhere from the top down? So we embed cybersecurity into the board itself. We actually have the board that speaks cyber, 1 or 2 people. What if we embed cyber at the C level? What if we embed cyber at the mid-management level? We embed cyber in everything we do. Maybe we've been approaching this from the wrong perspective, and we say, oh, we need a cyber practitioner that does cyber in the org. Well, it hasn't seemed to really affect too much. So I'm just thinking out loud.
Right? No, I completely agree. And my biggest thing too is we talk about things in this industry as if it is rocket science sometimes. And some stuff is, you know, if we're going to go into like reverse engineering and decompiling malware and some of those things, like, sure, yeah, that's an expertise. But a lot of the things that we are looking at from a security perspective, monitoring, responding to, recovering, we can certainly lean on the IT guy to do that as well. And I think that there's this misconception that cyber is almost more complicated to where other people in other roles can't wear multiple hats. One of my good friends in this industry is a CISO, but her entire background, and she's worked her little back off to get to where she's at today, to one of the largest hospitals now. And she's amazing, just like Beyonce level awesome. And she started in accounting. Her entire background is in accounting. And I love, you know, that's my big thing when it comes to diversity too, is different backgrounds, because that actually benefits teams a little bit more when you diversify your background of education and how you look at things, especially in cyber. But I think that we have to break down these conceptions that, you know, you have to have a cyber background in it, because we all know what it looks like right now for academia and coming out of school with a cyber degree and going there. Once they get their first job, they're basically learning everything from scratch anyway. The technology that we use, breaking down some of these barriers that we have people who don't understand it when they actually do understand it, that it is a part of their job. And, you know, I started in my career working with IT guys and network engineers and networking teams. And I'll tell you right now, a lot of them could have done these cybersecurity positions. They could have easily jumped ship, went over to the dark side and fixed some things. I agree that we need to make a lot of the cybersecurity terminology and concepts at a higher C-suite level. So it's not just executive buy-in. I shouldn't have to explain it to you. They actually understand it. And then you see the other side of it where we have, you know, this implementation of a curriculum at the elementary school level and at the middle school level, and high school level, trying to get students who I think that is actually a good journey. I think that's a good venture that's probably going to pay some dues. But it's not enough. I don't think it's enough. I don't know. How do you educate everyone? How do you get everyone up to speed?
Yeah, I don't think it happens. Here's what I've learned. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in one conversation. You read any good marketing book and they'll tell you it takes on average a message being sent to somebody in 7 iterations before they start to recognize the brand. Same thing, I think, in cyber. Like, it might take 5, 6, 7, 8 times of educating to get buy-in, to get understanding. I share this story often, and I'll just share it again. I remember when I started at my bank, my bank was run by, I'll just say it, about 12 70 to 75-year-old white dudes. That was my bank board. That's a shame. Yeah, it's not right.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I've never heard of that before.
No bank would do that, right? I mean, these guys didn't even read emails. They had a secretary that would
It looked like when you walk into the bank in Harry Potter.
Pretty much it. They might have actually been trolls. Like that. Yeah, it's hard to say. One wonders. Potentially both. Yeah. And imagine being in a situation like that and you're trying to explain cyber. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. But I will tell you this. I just was like, okay, fine. They're listening to me because the regulators are mandating that I get, 15 minutes a month with you. Okay. So I just shifted gears and I went into the first 5 minutes of my 15. I would just share a news story that was related to banks and cybersecurity. And I'll never forget the day when the bank president, midway through this story, he just says, stop, pause. I was like, okay. And he goes, I've been talking about asset quality for years now, for a decade after this big collapse, in 2008. He's like, maybe it's not asset quality, it's cybersecurity that could shut us down. I'm like, I just zipped my lips and I let him go.
Oh my gosh,
a light bulb. And it took about 7-8 months of that. And I didn't know it was going to happen, but I'm like, I don't know what else to do. Like, I can talk to you about risk all day long, but until you actually care about it and you can connect the dots between this mattering for your bank and not, I don't know what else I can do.
Right.
So I feel like he led himself to that water, but I did kind of point the way a little bit just by making it relevant. So my point is, I do think it takes some time to get there. And we do have to be patient. We do have to be willing to say, I tried once and it failed. I tried a second time. They didn't listen. I tried a third time. I maybe piqued their interest a little bit. 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th time. Now they and so that goes into this whole like training versus education, right? So often we're like, training is, you will learn this thing. Well, that doesn't mean anything to me if I don't want to learn it and it's not relevant to me. Education is different. Education is, here's something that can change you for the better. And I think we have to approach it from that perspective, and we have to be willing for it to take some time to land.
There's definitely a difference in approaching your employees and saying, hey, this is a new phishing campaign or technique on LinkedIn and Facebook, and just like, don't click things. And here's your certification button because you took this training and you took social media training. Versus saying, actually, here is the exact steps for you to go set all the privacy settings on your LinkedIn and on your Facebook. And here's some things that you should remove and consider, but actually doing more practical application. Like, that's education. I completely agree. I think that's the difference of, sure, we are training you, but it's not so we can check a box, but it's more so you can reduce your risk, individual risk, and then therefore, of course, any subsequent employment risk that the organization might face. So that's deep. That's deep, man. But not really super deep, but deep in a way that no one's doing it. Like no one's doing things evidence like that.
No, I think you're right. I don't think we are doing it, largely speaking. I mean, so much so, I was just last month, I think it was last month, it might have been 2 months ago, SEC just pushed out some new guidance saying that we are going to mandate that at the board level, you have at least one person who has a qualified background in cyber. And I see that, I'm like, yay, this is wonderful. This is an exact example of them mandating and pushing through regulations, something that should have happened a long time ago. And I think those are the right things in motion to get this kind of set correctly. It's just one example of we're not doing this, and I think we're starting to see things are in motion. They're going to change some of that in a good way.
Right. I mean, I won't take over an entire episode, but I'm sure we could go down the regulatory route and really where we would like to see it go, because right now it is just checking a box and moving on and writing policies and saying we're good. But I really, that's I mean, there's some other things on the SEC thing, new rulings that have been a thorn in my paw that we're going to have to navigate. But I would completely agree that having someone within at that board level that has a cyber background, like mandating a CISO is the biggest thing, or just having a CISO for your company. And I know but if you think about it, that's also not possible for some of these smaller to medium businesses. They can't even hire an IT guy half the time. And so really this is, a plug for the MSP space of having an MSP space focus on, do we have a CISO? If we're a large IT service providing, do we have a director of security or someone that is going to be our mouthpiece and someone that's actually internally looking and assessing cyber and relating it back to our customers is extremely
it
important.
is. And, a good example of this, because I know we have a lot of MSPs listening, is look at the new FTC safeguards. The very first requirement that FTC says if you are an organization where safeguards applies to you is this: you must have someone responsible for cybersecurity. And they were smart enough to say it doesn't have to be somebody inside your own organization. You actually can sort of like outsource that role. It can be a third party that's responsible for it. But then they say, in the same breath, they say, but you as a company are still responsible. You can't just shop out, oh, I have a fractional CISO that's doing this for me, so therefore I don't worry about it. Any more than you can say, oh, I don't worry about security because all my data is in the cloud. None of those things are true. They've never been true. That's the right start.
No.
And then I'll just say, for you as an MSP, that means you. The day has now come as an MSP.
Yeah.
You are not just IT management. You are not just handling tickets and hardware lifecycle. You have now stepped into a new era where you are expected, even from a regulatory perspective, to manage the risk, to communicate the risk of cyber to your clients. That means that you need to go down that journey of, okay, I better learn cyber myself, and I better start practicing it myself. And I better start making sure that I have at least one person in my organization that is dedicated towards that full-time equivalent role of cyber risk management for my clients. Now, you may be a small MSP and not there yet, but that's the day that's now come. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a wonderful thing, because it's just as you said, Mac, they can't do it.
I think it's a great
themselves.
thing. And it does sort of release the pressure, accommodate that talent shortage view. And we're not saying just go hire a bunch of VCSOs out there. The VCSO game is going to go booming. But it is, in a sense, for the MSPs as, taking cybersecurity seriously, putting services in, doing assessments, maybe adding to your docket of things that you would provide for your customers, or standardizing of a lot of what I've learned within this community through some of our partners that do more standardization of, you have to have cyber insurance or you have to have some sort of incident response plan. That's great. But I completely agree. Like, this is the time and opportunity to reach into that talent pool and find someone and say, we are going to not just hire someone who knows cyber and that's going to examine internally our cyber risk and our attack surface, but they're going to do it in a way that they can now socialize it with all of our customers, and they can create those standards, and they can be the job of a CISO in a sense, but for more than just the MSP, but now the SMB or any downstream customers that they serve. I think that that's going to be huge. And it also makes it so that the MSP CEO is like, oh my gosh, now I got to jump into cyber. I got to go get my CISSP. I'm going to have to go attend all these conferences. Well, you should, but also look into an option of just hiring someone that can fill that role and be that mouthpiece and be that shining light for your customers. And again, going back to like, how do we educate this at a universal level? Because a lot of those downstream customers have no idea what you're talking about. They just read MGM was hacked in the news and they're like, wow, well, we should cancel our trip to Vegas, honey.
I love it. You should cancel your trip to Vegas. I hate that place anyway. So,
it's so stinky. I remember when, during the pandemic, we all remember things very vividly, but they did Black Hat virtually. And so we were able to do Black Hat virtually. And I was just thinking, I'm like, you know what I really need to do? I need to turn off my AC. I need to put a fan in front of my trash can in my house just so I get like the really good essence of Vegas. And then I need to just smoke cigarettes indoors and have some blinking lights behind me, and boom, I'm a Black Hat all over again.
Yep. And then, yeah, just have the lights on all the time, because that place, there's never a window. God forbid they have a window in that city. I mean, that's just, what could you do? I'm with you. What a terrible, terrible place. I'm sorry. If anyone likes it, they're probably the same people that think that Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. It's probably the same people that like Vegas.
Oh my gosh. I swear, if that's the category now,
there's probably a correlation. There's a Venn diagram out there somewhere.
Raise your hand if you like Vegas.
So
I'll say that at Right a Boom. Maybe
like
someone who has a mic is like, raise your hand if you like Vegas.
Yes. But then, say, keep your hand up if you think that Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. Yes, because you'll probably notice the same hands.
Oh my gosh. That's the true test. Like, all right, well, I don't want to hang out with you guys.
So speaking of true tests, I want to get practical for a minute on this conversation. MSPs in particular that are listening today, or if you're not an MSP and you work with one, you have an MSSP, or you're just small and mid-sized business, I think this all applies to you. Is you may hear what Mac's talking about here and say, this is the future and I need to learn how to manage risk, and, regulations and cyber insurance and compliance are requiring it. Yes. But how do I do it? Well, I think there's a few prerequisites that you should work on. If you're like, okay, that's me, I got to do it. First is, especially as an MSP, you got to have authenticity. You need to eat your own tacos in security. So you can't just expect to go and say, hey, you got to be good at security, but I don't have to be good at security. That's never going to work. You're going to lack the authenticity. And so I would just say, pick a security framework and follow it. And my recommendation for most MSPs is stick with the CIS controls, Center for Internet Security. Pick those controls, go through them, and make it a commitment within a year to get through implementation group 1, which is the very first group. If you need help with that, I've got a free podcast for you. It's thecybercast.com. It's Andrew Morgan, it's me, it's Ryan Weeks, and it's Phyllis Lee, she's the director of the CIS controls. We go through every single control. So you have the pathway.
And if anyone doesn't know what that first control is, it is inventory and control of enterprise assets. It's because I have it like a Michael
and also
Jordan
like the hardest thing to accomplish. It doesn't help that I tease Phyllis all the time. I'm like, Phyllis.
It's a constant control to accomplish. It's a maintenance effort. I'm like,
Phyllis, we're all snowflakes here. Could you switch it to something super easy? Like, I don't know. Turn your computer on or put antivirus on your computer or something.
Right. You get number 1 and number 2 done, maybe even number 3. Then the rest is actually not as complicated.
So that's the first prerequisite. You can't expect to get your clients to do what you're not doing. It's like a rope. I can't push a rope. I can only pull a rope. Same thing with your clients. You can only pull them with you. So don't expect to be good at this if you're not doing it yourself. The second thing I think is valuable is understand that understand the history of the relationship with your client, and just come to terms with the fact that it may have been for 10 years now, you may have just been in an IT relationship and just selling them things. And every time you meet with them, it's about, here's the next thing to sell you. So recognize your relationships you've had with your client, and recognize that they may treat cyber as another thing you're selling me, because that's all you've ever done in the relationship. And then if you may be thinking, hearing this right now, is maybe you're driving, listening to this podcast, and you're like, oof, ouch, that's me. What do I do about that? Just recognize it and come to the client and say, hey, I know the history of our relationship has been primarily IT and sales based, but one of the things that's happening is we're now required to handle security for you because you are a target and we are a target. And we personally at our own MSP have been going down this security journey of really building and formulating a good security strategy to protect our own house. We got to do the same with you. And here's a couple ways we're going to start with that, right? And if you're not doing that, you're going to struggle with it.
I think the realism sets in. It's a lot more palpable if you say, hey, just go to the showroom of RSA and walk around and see all the companies that are selling you something that is going to solve a cyber problem. And it's the only one doing something like this with this unique technology or unique algorithm that they have. But the reality is like, let that soak in and maybe play Mad Libs or something, or buzzword bingo, and walk around and just see what it is. And then go back to your hotel room and look yourself in the mirror and say, am I the problem? Am I the one doing this too to my customers? Because I love that you said that. That's something we need to fix, is how we shouldn't be selling cyber. That's where we're at right now. I would like us to just, it's like we shouldn't be selling, eating healthy food and fruits and vegetables. That people should be doing it and should have access to it. But I completely agree.
That brings up the third and final
one.
thing I'll give you, because I just want to give, there's more we could talk about, but I think 3 things to focus on. The third is commit to being an educator. This goes right to what you just said, Mac, is understand that they're not going to move on it probably right away. You're going to have to do some things like you have to get good at risk, understand how to do a good risk assessment, show them where they stand, how they stack up to their peers, if they're regulated, there's compliance, how they're stacking up to those things. But you also just have to understand you got to be an educator, and you got to learn how to teach why this matters. And you got to, again, we're educating, not training. I can train my dog. We're not talking about, here's a little biscuit, go do this thing I'm commanding you. That's training. This is education that make your life better. I go to university, I get a better job. I get out of the factory, and now I've got a more stable job that's, less difficult on my body. But that's what education does. Same thing in cyber. So those are my big 3 things. Commit to a framework. Then the second thing of just really trying to understand the relationship between you and your client, and understand that it's changed and you got to communicate that. And then third, commit to education. I think if you do those things, you'll find that you're going to have success in cyber.
I love that. Those are Wes's 3 takeaways. I would completely agree with that too. Second one's going to be a little bit more difficult. The third one is education, right? If you feel like you're checking a box or having them check a box or sign something, then you're not educating them to the why. And I can only state that because as I've been kind of more in this specific MSP space, I'm painfully shocked by the amount of organizations that don't even have antivirus on their systems. And we're just going about our day, like a basic level of endpoint security. They're not even doing things like that. And then I'm sitting here promoting MFA and enabling that, but I'm like, but really? I mean, like AV? Like, I'm not even saying like this is just like an airbag in your car, but like let's get something
I'm trying to think if we were related to a car, what would AV even be anymore? It'd be like so useless.
Oh, it's not like the seatbelt.
I know what it is. Sure. The AV for is like having a heater in Phoenix in your car. That's AV. It's that worthless.
Oh, okay.
Right? Like it's there.
It's worthless. It's going to keep you going. Oh, I thought maybe it was like a broken AC unit in your car. So it's still 99 degrees outside, but inside the car,
I like this train of thought. I've never really thought of it. So maybe like, your lane departure warnings, that's like your MFA, like because it is valuable and it helps to make sure you don't make a mistake. Maybe your airbags are like your MDR, like Blackpoint, that's my airbags to say, we're going to, when something happens, we're going to take care of it. We're going to make sure you don't lose your crown jewels. Man, we're going somewhere with this.
We're going to hit you in the face so you know.
But I maintain that classic antivirus, like your Norton or whatever, I hope I don't get sued for saying that, is like, that's definitely having a heater in your car in Phoenix. It's worthless.
We can bleep it out, like you said, a bad word.
Wait, what was that AV he actually said?
I absolutely love that.
Probably guess.
All right. So I do have a couple other things I want to touch on. All right. We see this larger divide between the IT industry and the cyber industry. Let's say your mom and pop shop versus in Chicago, but like a pretty big franchise versus like national bank level. Do you think between those, so meaning the SMB space and the MSP space, who often source and serve both those large organizations, IT and security for smaller to large organizations or large businesses, do you think that SMB MSP space is getting the short stick in the cyber industry? And, I mentioned this when you walk into RSA and you look around the showroom of just getting the realization of how much is being sold to you and is just purely sales. But are they getting the short stick in a sense that it is not, this goes back to budget. Cyber's not affordable.
Yeah. I think so. I think there is a short stick that's here. There's some advantages that come with being small too, and I'll talk about that. But I have noticed this, Mac, and I bet you've seen the same thing. By and large, the MSP, the channel is what we call this. The MSP, if you're listening today and you don't quite know MSP, when we say the words the channel, we just mean, all these people that serve other industries. And so I think the channel, by and large, including the SMB space, is about 5 to 7 years behind what enterprise is doing. And this is a little key that you can kind of clue in on what was happening 5 to 6 years ago right now. Well, I'll tell you, one of those big things was security automation, right? Everyone had their SIMs at this point. But then they're like, well, how do we do anything with all of that? We got all these alerts coming in and we're overwhelmed and we don't have the staff.
There's so many
Yep.
logs. Just don't
So
look
then
at the
all
dashboard.
these SOAR, security orchestration automation response platforms came on, and that's why they all got gobbled up. So if that's true, then about right now we're going to see a big focus in security automation. It's going to start coming into the market. So that's not the point of the podcast. It's just to say that I think we're on average 5 to 7 years behind what's happening top of market. And it's a bit of a mo money, mo problems thing, in the sense of course, the bigger industries are going to drive those things first because they're operating at scale. But also it's just the reality that it takes time for some of the, to use a Reagan term, this trickle down to kind of happen at some point. Like it does trickle down and it does start to become a requirement down market. So do we have disadvantages in that we do have the short end of the stick? Yes. Do we have less of a budget to spend on things? Yes. But also, I'll steal this from a friend of mine that works for one of the biggest banks in the world, international bank. He made a comment to me. He said, sometimes when it comes to threat intel, I favor and value the threat intelligence reports coming from smaller organizations versus like the big threat intel companies, because you know your network and you know it's real and you know what's true, versus I've got subnets I've never even seen before inside my network. Like I've got locations that no one even knows that we own anymore. It's colossally difficult to maintain and protect all of these assets, because we got to do it at scale. You don't. So we also have advantages that come with being on the short end of the stick too. And that maybe, so it kind of goes both ways, I guess is my point.
And where do politics fit into this? Organizational politics. We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but where we're saying like, are we the failures? Is it our problem? Or are there other factors that are actually weighing against us? Budget being one of them, the industry.
Yeah.
Right, 5 to 7 years behind of where we're really at. And of course, your 3 takeaways too, which are, and critical control number 1. That's a lot for our users to take away. But are politics going to be a factor
I hinted
into
at this earlier. I just believe that it's less a cybersecurity problem and more a human problem. And I think if we'll start to accept that reality, there for sure there's issues. But I mean, you could even theoretically, if you want to get philosophical for a minute, even 0 days come from vulnerabilities in code, which people write. So like at some point, people become the problem to all of this. And so I think if we start at the people level and say, why don't we really think about it from the people perspective? So yes, if that's the case, then politics absolutely are an issue. I think the politics are a little bit different down market, right? Because you don't have this power struggle in the C-suite of everyone gunning for each other's jobs, and it's like Game of Thrones up in here, corporate level, corporate edition. But it's probably more like the business owner at at a client the MSP serves. You're like, I'm not paying for that. I've never paid it before. No. We're not a target. No one's coming after us. No one cares about my data. So I think at the political level, it's probably a lot more of that. Or like FTC safeguards. Come on, man. They can't regulate me. I'm a car dealership. I'm not gonna deal with that. Whatever. I'm a libertarian. I'll just do what I want to steal from Ron Swanson. Right. I love Ron Swanson, by the way.
Also, yes,
exactly. What could possibly go wrong with this? So yeah, I do think largely politics play in, but it is a different style of politics. Usually it's the politics of like, prove to me why this matters, because I'm not just going to go give you money for this cyber nerd crap unless I really believe that it's
make it relevant.
Yes.
I talked about this a little bit yesterday with our director of APG actually, and we did a job interview and then we got really existential for like an hour on the phone. But we were talking about how to make it relevant to the even in the MSP space. Is what we don't see from our threat intel reports is really breaking it down, which is what we're trying to do right now, solve this problem by verticals. And we're breaking it down by, you're an MSP and you serve primarily healthcare. Well, your job's going to be a lot easier because now that is what you're going to focus on from a cyber perspective and make it relevant to them. And then you get that buy-in, and not like buy-in, like sign the check buy-in, but you actually get them listening to the words that are coming out of your mouth in relation to cyber. And I don't see a lot of that. I know that people are probably doing that to some extent, but it's not socialized to the larger channel. I'm going to learn everything new every time I talk to you, I swear. But to the larger channel, it's like, who are the people that you serve? And maybe it's a mixture between education and retail. But by the way, at an integral level, like if we really want to get granular, cyber does change when you look at these industries. Maybe the players are the same, but the dependencies, whether it's a Swift system or a POS system, right? We still need to understand some of those, and of course regulatory requirements, but we need to understand some of those differences, and
I
they will
agree.
listen
And I
then.
also think to carry that, birds of a feather do flock together. Like I saw some white egrets out yesterday, and there's like 6 of them in my yard. These little white Florida birds, like peck at your grass looking for bugs, right? And these big long beaks and cool little guys. Yeah.
Aw.
Although I bet they'd be good to smoke up. I would like to try a capture one. My wife didn't like it when I said that.
The one
Yeah,
from
I
like
know,
0
but
to
it's
60. Like they're
uh,
such cute
I'm
little
gonna put you in
birds.
my
I'm gonna
smoker.
eat
I
them.
know she never
Maybe
likes it when I say
someday.
that. Or we have these monster birds, these sandhill cranes,
Like
even bigger than
heron
that.
size.
These sandhill
Oh, those
cranes
are
are like, not including their big old long necks, just their bodies come up to like the size of like a 6, 7, 8-year-old. They're just massive birds. They're
it's like
basically
Jurassic
dinosaurs.
Park.
Yeah, people say
Yeah.
dinosaurs are extinct. I'm like, you've never come to
I
Florida and
mean,
seen alligators and these things. And anyway, apparently the locals used to kill them and smoke them all the time. And they called them ribeyes in the sky, is what they called them.
huh.
They apparently taste like ribeyes.
I think just if there's not a,
So I'm
county
just
law
saying,
against it, then
it just
bring
so
some
happened that
chicken
one found
wings
his
or
way to
whatever
my
they're called
smoker, and I
wings.
closed the lid and started the fire. I mean, it just happened, right?
I was cleaning my smoker. It was
It
crazy.
just happened. Anyway, yes, birds of a feather do flock together, and I think there is value. And you just got me on that. I just had to say it. There is value in that for sure. Like it brings in things like, hey, other clients that are just like you are doing this. Well, I care about that. I want to know, am I ahead or behind? I want to know that. I have a few MSPs that really focus on a certain industry vertical, and they leverage that all the time. I know one MSP that does a phenomenal job of this. They actually assign their banks letter grades that are tied to regulatory adherence and maturity. And so they actually assign them a quarterly letter grade. And he's like, let me tell you, when we get a bank to an A, they don't want to ever go off it. And if we have a discussion, and he's like, we use it in a pure sense. We don't abuse it, right? But he tells them, hey, I know you guys don't want to do this, but this is really going to pull you guys down to probably, an A- or a B. Well, we can't have that. We've got to do that, right? And it works well.
Why does everyone love scorecards? Like everyone, I mean, I know we're
That's why.
raised around
Yes.
grades, but that's the thing in cyber. It's like I've learned that in the past, 10 years alone. Even on tabletops, they're like, "So how did I do?" And I'm like, let me just count your points.
Yeah, the reality is I'm like the
How
last
you
year,
did?
maybe the first year of millennials, right? So I'll be the first to say we millennials and Gen Zs and all of us, we're all snowflakes. We know it. And we like to be told that we're doing a good job, and we like to get a good letter grade that's given to us, whether we
Yeah.
earned it or not. That's true.
Yeah, we don't want a participation trophy. We want to know if we can improve.
But I
which
do want a
that does make
participation
sense.
trophy too.
I
Speaking
also
of which, you
would
think
like a
Blackpoint
trophy.
would give me a participation trophy
And a
for being
gift
the
card.
first? No, I'm just teasing.
Oh my gosh. You know what? Cody's going to make that happen, actually. We will order a little trophy and send it to every single guest. This is participation
I love it. I'll put it right
trophy.
here on my wall.
Okay. So I know we've gotten to this beatnik level, more existential than I thought we would get, which I absolutely love. That's my style. And I'm probably going to drag you on to be a guest one more time. We'll see how this goes. But let's say you're giving me advice and also our listeners advice, and those that may or may not be rolling their eyes around some of the things that we're talking about. Like, yes, we know these things. And we've talked about kind of the deep factors that play a role in maybe our potential failings or absolutely our failings, and whether or not we're all going to go to Vegas next year. We're still going to go, let's be honest. Can we leave the audience with some positive light or a hunger for more if we wanted them to show back up for episode 2, but to want to learn more, whoever is listening, about cybersecurity? What would that advice be?
My advice, so we prognosticators like to just talk, like big talk, right? And you hear all these things and we can feel intimidated. We just often feel like there's too much to do. This is like, you remember when JFK, I wasn't alive for this. I know you weren't either, but when he had his famous, we're going to the moon, dang it. And that's just what we're doing. So we're going to do it. He didn't give the whole plan on how we were going to get to the moon and how we were going to beat Russia. He just sort of set the vision and said, this is what we're going to do. We're committed to this as a nation. And it set us on fire to say, yeah, we are going to do it. But there were tacticians behind the scenes that split up this lofty goal, this impossible, literal moonshot goal of going to the moon. There were people behind the scenes that you'll never know that were the ones that, like, I made this one little part that got us there, and I was focused on that thing.
Yeah.
That's my thing in security, is understand that we talk a big game and we talk about a lot of stuff to do, and it can feel intimidating. Just start somewhere and start small. I think that's the big takeaway. So if you heard a lot today on this podcast, go pick the one thing that came out of it that was impactful that you know you can do. And I promise you there's something for everybody. So whether that's starting on the CIS controls, or thinking about what your education journey and pathway looks like, or making sure every employee in your MSP is rowing in the same direction when it comes to cyber. There's a lot. Just pick one and start working on it. And then that's how we
Right.
get it going.
I would say come to a cyber event, like come to a conference, because again, people wear many hats. You're trying to learn. That's why I loved Rite of Boom. Like
Yeah.
come to a conference and just sit in and absorb it all like a sponge. And then, like you said, just prioritize, pick and choose the
Yep.
thing that you want to focus on. And it's
Yep.
not super complicated. I used to hand out this book. I'd speak at these, women innovator events for high school girls, and I'll be like, "Come to cyber. It's like really cool." It's like trying to be cool in front of high schoolers, and that's where I learned that Facebook's not cool and Instagram's cool, and now something Instagram's not cool. I don't really know.
Yeah. It's basically once their
It
parents
really
get
made
on the
me
platform,
feel
it's not
old.
cool anymore. I mean, that's just how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was trying to present in a cool way, but I would always give out this one book to them, and it would be The Girl's Guide to Privacy. And they'd actually really enjoy it. And I'm like, this is applicable in your life now. Yeah, I'd love you to go get a career in it. There's lots of opportunities. But just read this book and realize that it is applicable to you. And cyber's that. When you look at the CISO map of all the things in cyber, it's exhaustive and it is scary. And we're going to break it down every episode at a time. But ultimately, pick something and go there. I love that advice. And then come back for more to this podcast, because I will bring on guests that will probably demystify more of these cyber concepts. Well, Wes, thank you so much for being here. Seriously, this was fantastic. I love this. Hopefully we didn't hurt any feelings, but I got a lot from this. So thank you so much for
quite welcome.
participating.
And I'll just say, just in final closing, thank you for having me. And if anyone does want to follow me in any other places, just look me up on LinkedIn, or check out what we're doing at Empath Cyber as well. A lot of what we're talking about today are stuff that we're actually solving for at Empath. So thank you for having me on today. And I cannot tell you how much of a fun conversation this has been. I know this podcast is going to blow up. So yes.
So good. Yeah. And then by the time we get to the end of it, we're going to see the, briefing of the MGM. Actually, probably not by the time this airs. This will still be ongoing. So we'll just have like an update, like it's fantasy football or something. Awesome. Well, thank you, Wes. And thank you everyone for listening in. Be sure to join us for our episode 2 coming up soon. Thanks.